Hey everyone, it's Lily with Shared Segments China. Thank you to everyone who's already filled out the survey about searching for birth families together. I just wanted to give everyone a kind of behind the scenes look at the process and kind of what I'm doing with that information. Yeah. And as a reminder, all identifying details have been altered or anonymized for privacy. So what that really means is these numbers are not exact. They're only changed by, like a couple digits here and there, just so if, anyone actually shares these matches and is looking at this, they wouldn't be able to identify people, so people's privacy stays safe. So one of the first things I did, and again, as a reminder, this was a tree I built for somebody searching for their birth fam or their birth father. They are not adopted from China, but they were conceived via anonymous sperm donor, so they didn't have any information like name or anything like that. So I took this person's ancestry matches, some of the top ones, and examined those first. So again, these names are not real. These people, could technically exist in the world, but this family is completely made up. Um, yeah. So what I first try to do is build the context. So the amount of DNA you share with someone and how it breaks down, so like for example, segment size, should influence your interpretation, but you should also consider other context clues. So how do we build context and what should it contain? So important context would be, if this stuff is available, and I understand that not, every match is going to list every single thing about themselves. But some of the stuff you can pick up right away can be how old is your match? What is their gender? Where do they live? Sometimes they might list siblings or other immediate family members. So one of the first ones I looked into was Bailey Hobb. Bailey had a partial family tree, but you couldn't see any structure and only a partial list of names. So maybe about 10, and you couldn't even see, full names of everyone. Sometimes it was just last names. Um, Bailey included relatives on this list with the surname Doe and Smith. So I just kind of took note of that during my first pass through. I also noticed that Dolores Rogers was pretty, close, shared a lot of DNA with this person searching for their father, 794. But they did not match Bailey. So I tried to figure out, like what would cause this. I also want to note, even though grand aunt seems like, oh my gosh, that's probably pretty close. Um, if you think about it, your grandparents can have, an unlimited amount of siblings, basically. And especially if, those people have married out of the family and the last names have changed, that makes things a lot more complicated and isn't always as simple as, find the sibling. All right, so trying to make sense of things. Just note that, whether or not you're looking for family in the United States or in China, most of the time you'll be starting with incomplete data. The more pieces you put together, the clearer the picture becomes. And make sure to stay open to adapting your interpretation. And I'm going to show you why this is really important. So here's an example of how interpretations can change. I found out after many hours of research and cross-comparing information that Bailey Hobbs' gender was input incorrectly, and Bailey was actually a female. Once you correct information like this as you go, it can make things like obituaries or graves make a lot more sense. All right, so then I started building out everybody's family trees as best as I could. And again, this is a very simplified version. There wasn't always times where, somebody listed, every single person in their tree, the perfect lineage, things like that. There's actually a lot of times where, everybody who's alive is not listed because it's private. Sometimes people would mix up who their grandparents and their great grandparents were. So there has to be a lot of cross-validation and cross-comparison that goes into this because we're not looking at, official scientific records. These are records that are self-reported by people. But anyway, so in Jack Richards, I noticed the last names Doe and Doe. Bailey Hobb, I saw Smith and Doe. And then I was kind of like, okay, I've seen at least Doe before up there. Moving on to Stephen Jeffers, I saw the last names Jeffers and Smith. Now, what this let me do is start to hypothesize that Stephen Jeffers was related to these other two people, Bailey Hobb and Jack Richards, through Stephen Jeffers' mother, because that's where the Smith name is coming in. Again, these things are just guesses until you find more supporting evidence, but it really lets you start to paint a picture. Okay, so Dolores Rogers, again, she does not match Bailey. So I got a new set of, last names in here. So we have Buck and we have North. For Lisa McVeigh, we had to go up a little bit more. So Lisa did not have their dad named, but they had their grandpa named. And again, so since this was a paternal grandfather, we could use, context clues to guess that Lisa's father, at least his last name had to be Stone, even if we don't know the first name. And then when you get up here, you see that Mary, her grandma, her middle name is Doe. So we have Mary Doe Stone. Mary's father is Alex Doe. And that's how Mary ties back in with the other Does we saw above. Patty Walker. Here we have Mark Fern as her father and Caroline Doe. Again, here we see the overlap of the last name. And again, that was a very simplified version, because just because you found, the last name, you're like, okay, there's a doe here and there's a doe there. That doesn't mean that that's, the place where the branches crossed. You could have a set of first cousins, second cousins. There could be, varying offsets to the generations, lots of different things. And I feel like you can kind of see this in this family tree. As you can see, it wasn't necessarily as simple as creating, just going straight up on all the matches. Um, you had to kind of go up and outwards until you saw how all the trees kind of started to cross paths. And what that let us do, or let me do at least, is whenever I, found how the trees crossed, I was able to identify the biological father. And that also helped provide, actual evidence for this hypothesis rather than just saying, like, okay, well, you all kind of match here or kind of match there, or you guys look similar. It let us have some real data behind that. What this also let us do, thinking about our simplified lists above, it let us look for patterns by just sketching those all out. So our original list, if we looked at the last names, we kind of have a bunch. We have Doe, Walker, Smith, Hobb, Jeffers, North, Stone, McVeigh. Um, at a glance, that's kind of a lot. Um, Scrolling down, because we looked for patterns, we can hypothesize that a lot of these names are ones that have married in, because they don't overlap on the lists. So we're crossing out McVeigh, we're crossing out North, Hobb, Walker. Um, Also note, again, these things are evolving as new information comes in. So this doesn't mean that this is your final list. This is your list as it stands, when you just drafted, those first six people's trees. All right. So, in the next one, I'm going to go over how you can use some other tools to also synthesize this information, and maybe speed up the process. But thank you for everyone who watched. And if you have questions or ideas for me in the future, drop them in the comments or send me a message.